Hey everyone, welcome to the Sex, Bodies, and Cinema podcast. I'm Jason Good, one of the co-hosts of the show, along with Ashley Rose. This podcast takes a close look at films that explore sexuality and embodiment, with the aim to make space for what is, for many of us, a taboo subject. I'm a former screenwriter and director, and Ashley is a former actor. Both of us now work in the field of somatic sex education. You can find out more about Ashley and her work at ashleyelizabethrose.ca. You can find me at somarelating.ca. There you will find my hidden relationship patterns quiz that will help you identify some of the issues we often discuss in these episodes. It's free with your email and comes with a companion ebook that unpacks the different patterns that can undermine intimacy and offers suggestions for improving how you show up in relationships. Go to the show notes and click on the link to take it today. Today's film is 2024's Babygirl. The film was written and directed by Halina Reijn. The film stars Nicole Kidman as a high-powered CEO who puts her career and family on the line when she begins an affair with a much younger intern, played by Harris Dickinson. Sophie, Wilde, and Antonio Banderas also star. Our guest today is Daddy Lobo. You can find him on Instagram @_LoboBear_, as well as other social media platforms. The links for these will be in the show notes. I want to note that we had some sound issues with Lobo's mic, so unfortunately the quality is not what we would have liked, but we're grateful for his presence and voice and hope you'll stay with it. Without further delay, here is our episode on Halina Reijn's Babygirl.
You're very young. I don't want to hurt you.
I think I have power over you. Because I could make one call and you lose everything. Does that turn you on when I say that?
Seeing the trailer again, does it match the movie that you watched?
It's almost a compilation of a few of my favorite moments, but yeah, I think maybe it's not as much of a thriller as they make it out to be for me, even though there's some allusions to the erotic thriller that they were playing. But
I think it's one of those trailers, and this is just a trait of trailers that I've been seeing just in the last little while, that they'll give off a lot of the story in the trailer.
mm-hmm.
And so then you can kind of go into it and you're like, okay, well, I know what that kind of get what's happening. You know, you see that a lot lately, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Just as a film watcher, for me, it's very annoying, but it's pretty well selling what it is. Story of a woman in power trying to balance power dynamic with personal sexual satisfaction, borderline problematic.
Yeah, because the other trailer issue is always when it's completely different than the movie itself, and they're just trying to get right. That's the secondary trailer. There's the over advertised where it shows too much. Yeah. What about for you?
I think the trailer gives away a lot, and it's almost like it's trying to be Basic Instinct or Fatal Attraction. And I find the movie a little more messier than that. It's a little more grounded and human. But the trailer's like, this is a sexy movie.
Yeah, it makes it seem like
this powerful man. And I have a very distinct memory of the first time I saw this trailer. I don't think I'm ever going to forget this because it was in the theaters. I don't know what movie I was at with my youngest 13-year-old daughter. And this trailer comes on. And at the end of it, she just like quietly leans over to me and she says, I never want to see that movie, but you should do it for your podcast.
So awesome.
It's very funny.
Okay, this is Sex, Bodies, and Cinema. I'm Jason.
I'm Ashley.
This is a podcast about films that tackle the subjects of sexuality and embodiment. It's a conversation show where we'll unpack the films from our own perspective as both former artists and practicing somatic sex educators. Today's film is Halina Reijn's 2024 film, Babygirl. The film stars Nicole Kidman as a high-powered CEO who puts her career and family on the line when she begins an affair with a much younger intern played by Harris Dickinson. Sophie, Wilde, and Antonio Banderas also star. Our guest today is Lobo. Lobo is a bisexual sex worker who strives to bring bisexual representation to as much as he can. He's been in the industry for about 8 years, and he works for a health initiative for men in sex work, providing a variety of services to gay, bi, queer men and gender diverse people in Vancouver. He hopes his insights will help people gain a new appreciation for sex work, and he hopes to educate and destigmatize the industry. You can find him on Instagram at _LoboBear_, as well as a bunch of other social media platforms, all of which will be linked in the show notes. Lobo, welcome to the podcast.
Wow.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So I first heard of Babygirl because I'm a bit of a film nerd when I heard it premiere at Venice Film Festival, which was last summer. And Nicole Kidman got Best Actress, and then it went to TIFF. And I'm like, what is this movie?
Ooh, you know what, though? Before we skip too far ahead, let's talk about how we first came together.
Oh, yeah.
So Lobo and another friend of mine, like a very dear friend who's also a sex worker, connected us because we're both in Vancouver and they had collaborated before. So we actually approached you initially to potentially do a Nora.
Yes.
Nora.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. So we had this schedule for ourselves to actually record, but none of us had seen it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Lobo had.
I had seen it.
Yeah.
I can understand why some people really, really like the film because, yes, it's a good depiction of real sex work within the context of a strip club.
The film is really like a character study of a Nora, and the strip club is a device to introduce and then create some shame for the family, but it's not about sex work.
It's not.
No. And you had warned me that on our preliminary call that it's kind of two films, that there's things that you liked and that it's polarizing in the sex work community. For me, I bought into the hype and I was like, oh, this definitely, if she won Best Actress and it's a lauded movie.
Yeah.
So I turn it on. We've got a week to record, to do the pre-notes and everything. And I'm like, oh, I kept expecting it to get better and I kept hanging in. And I was like, no, half an hour to go. They're going to do some kind of deep messaging around it. Yeah. And by the end, I was going, we can't do this movie because it just felt like if I had a quote about it, it would be that I've never seen such a well done film leave me completely untouched or it didn't move me at all. I didn't understand what the messaging was, and I didn't understand what the core, why I would root for any one of these people. And that's inclusive of brilliant acting and great shots. And there's a scene with the thugs. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was very Tarantino-esque. I didn't think they were pulling stereotypes all over the place. I thought there were some subtleties, and I just couldn't get on board. I was like, this doesn't have enough meaning for the juice of the podcast.
Yeah.
So we had to pivot. We canceled.
There are aspects of the film which I think are really good. It's just to say that it's a film about sex work and it's a film that revolves around sex workers, I think is incorrect and does a disservice to better films that actually revolve around sex workers.
Absolutely.
I mean, I keep jumping back to it because it's probably one of my favorite films that even involve or include sex workers, but Moulin Rouge. But that's because I have an obsession about that movie. But I would that movie does a better job of involving sex workers,
right,
than Nora does,
right?
Because the whole film basically revolves around Satine and her kind of this internal struggle that she has with herself of I want to be with the man I love, and I even believe their love more than I believed the love in Nora.
Sure,
I'm just nah, man, this guy just really likes her because
in either direction.
Yeah, just she's hot and. I guess she's a good lay, probably a good lay, sure. But there's I didn't believe a single bit of the chemistry between the two of them. Not at all.
Yeah. No. It's more of a movie about a
rich teenager who was just spending daddy's money.
Yeah.
I can't get on board with it.
Well, speaking of Moulin Rouge, let's
transfer to Kidman.
Let's go to Nicole Kidman.
Which is also starring Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
That's how we come back.
Yeah. So I think her performance in this movie is incredible, personally. So I'm just curious, as before we jump into the film, what's your relationship? So you have a relationship to Nicole Kidman through Moulin Rouge, especially.
Yes.
How do we respond to her? What's our history to her as a performer?
I mean, I love Nicole Kidman. I think, she's got her hits and her misses, as do most actors. I enjoy her work. I enjoy her acting. I can't remember the last time I saw her in something. So I think this is the first time she's come back to main role acting after a long while, hasn't it?
She's done a lot of television.
Right.
What about you, Ashley?
I was never a fan until the last 5 to 8 years, and then I'm stunned. She reminds me of Robin Wright Penn in that she's an actor's actor. She's willing to go the mile. She does, or Juliette Binoche, that caliber of female actor who they never pull back from their body, from the truth of the human experience. And I just have so much respect for her. What about you?
Yeah, so she's 8 years older than me, which means she's kind of been in the cinema firmament since I was a kid, right? So I can remember distinctly seeing her in Dead Calm, which is this 1989 thriller, on my parents renting it on VHS and me sneaking a watch or something from behind the couch. Days of Thunder is when she really popped, right? Because I would have been the target audience for that. And then,
Far and Away,
Batman movies. And then she's the first... She's the first return actress to our podcast.
Yes.
right? Eyes wide shut. And I think that she's just a really daring performer. So Eyes Wide Shut is a good example. One of my favorite films is Dogville, which is Lars von Trier's film, where it's just shot in this warehouse and it's this village, and each home is just an outline on the floor. And it's this really interesting device because it lets you see inside all of the rooms whenever you're shooting ones. Anyways, it's an incredible experimental film. And she just like makes bold, daring choices consistently. And this is, of course, no exception to that. Had you heard of the director before?
I had not. No. And now I want to see all her films.
No.
Because they're very much up there.
Apparently I'd seen her on screen. I didn't realize she was this Dutch actress who I had seen a few times. And
yeah, I don't think I've seen her act either.
Yeah, she's really interesting. Well, let's jump into the film. So the opening scene, her and her husband Jacob, played by Antonio Banderas, who we'll talk about in a little bit. What was your response to that opening sex scene?
I get it. Maybe this is just because of like my own history and just because of my work, right? Like there's definitely moments where you're with someone and it's clear they're more into you than you're into them. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna power through. What's that phrase? Close your eyes and think of England.
Yeah. I think it's so universal that we've all been in a sexual situation where maybe the other person, their drives unfold differently. Some part of us isn't met. We don't know when to bring it up. We don't know how to bring it up. And we're struggling to stay in some kind of a relationality. Like we're averaging out what they need and doing something. You know, we work with a lot of people, for instance, who just learning to ask, to notice value and communicate what you want, because some people might notice it and not value it. Not know to value it. As we see over the course of the film, she has it in the box of like a real like paraphilia, that there's something wrong with her. So to value what you need and then to learn how to communicate it, that's something as simple as like squirming your hips into a certain posture so you get the angle of touch that you need is the equivalent of what she's doing in a lot of ways, in my opinion. Just how can we really have that vulnerability and candor to say, this is my sexual system?
Yeah. So if you haven't seen the film yet, this isn't a major spoiler or anything. There's an opening sex scene between her and her husband, played by Antonio Banderas, and they're seemingly having an ecstatic experience together.
Yeah, lots of heavy breathing.
She seems to orgasm. The camera makes a really interesting turn where they go upside down, which to me was like, oh, okay, their marriage is going to get flipped upside down in the story. It's like right there in the opening shot. But then her husband falls asleep and she goes and masturbates to porn. I haven't done this yet on the podcast, but I want to read the first page of this script. Is one of the best first pages of a script I've ever read because it tells you everything. So I'm just going to read it. Okay. Interior, Romy and Jacob's apartment. So Nicole Kidman's name is Romy. Close on, a woman's face, Romy, 49. Pure ecstasy. She holds her breath, lets go, and starts to orgasm. The camera reveals her husband, Jacob, 58, warm, handsome, who is laying underneath her and climaxes at the same time. He is in heaven as she leans down and brings her face close to his. Jacob, I love you. Romy, love you. Lovingly, she kisses him. He turns over and falls asleep. A beat. Romy's eyes are restless. Quietly, she gets out of bed. Interior, Romy and Jacob's apartment, long hallway to bedroom's night. Quickly, Romy walks to her study. Interior, study, night. Romy sneaks into her study and opens her laptop. The screen lights up the otherwise dark room. She types quickly, then takes the laptop from the desk and puts it down on the floor. She lies down on her belly in front of it. She faces the computer. She clicks on one of the videos. Her hand moves towards her crotch. On the screen, Romy sees, close on a woman's face. She answers questions from a man who is filming her. This is on screen. The man, how does daddy use you? Woman, any way he pleases. Man, louder. Woman, any way he pleases. Romy sees how the couple on her screen start to have rough sex. She covers her mouth with her hand while she pleasures herself until she comes. And then in bold, the last line on the page is, for real this time.
Oh.
That's on the first page of the script.
Wow.
It's like, oh, that just tells you.
Even a reveal for the writing.
Yeah, it tells you what's going on. Prepping for this episode, I thought, oh, I know that a lot of our audience are people who work in this field like us. But I'm hoping that the Ramis of the world are listening to this podcast. That's kind of my target audience, the people who...
Or all of our own inner Ramis, because I think we all...
Yeah. As she describes later, these like dark shadows that she doesn't know what to do with. She doesn't know who to reveal them to, all come out in that first scene. It's sort of like everything you need to know about this character. So then the next scene, we've discovered she's the CEO and she's got this big company, a robotics company. But then the first kind of like important scene that something is going to change is the dog. There's this dog that looks like it's going to maul her. And then this young man interrupts this mauling with a cookie and subdues the dog. And she's immediately taken by that. Had you seen Harris Dickinson and other things?
I hadn't, no. In trailers.
Triangle of Sadness is a movie I've like sort of is on my list that I'm going to get to. And I knew he was in that, but I hadn't experienced it before.
But that moment gave me a huge laugh. I laughed right out loud. I was laughing through. I had a shit-eating grin for most of this film. And as you know, I texted you immediately. And I was like, Jason, we're in the wrong business. We should be making like fictionalized stories of people's unfolding sexualities in life. We just need more millions and millions of dollars than the podcast. But, that was a great moment. It's so funny. It's so on the nose.
The director thinks of this as a comedic film. The next time I watch it, I'm going to think of it more as a comedy.
I don't think it's fully a comedy. I do find it funny. I don't think it's fully an emulation of 90s erotic thrillers. And I don't think it's about sub-dom dynamics for the most part. To be honest, I don't think it's any of those things. I think it's a really interesting piece about how we get to know ourselves sexually and how that impacts all the facets of our life. And I think that's why it's special.
The internalized repression of like, I know what it is I want, but because I'm in the situation I'm in, I can't allow myself to truly want what it is I want. Like, it's clear that Romy is kinky. And I think just she isn't allowing herself to be okay with having those desires, whether it's because she's married, whether it's because she's in a vanilla relationship, whatever. But I think that's part of what leads her down this path of infidelity is she's like, oh, this is an outlet for me to finally get what I want, which is something that has been missing from me sexually and something that satisfies me sexually. Because of course, like sexuality is quite an important thing for us as humans. Like we're sexual creatures. We're one of the only species on the planet that has sex for pleasure. And it plays such a big part in our society, right? And so for someone to have such huge aspects of themselves that they have to consistently hide. I mean, like you see it all the time with queer men, because I've been out as bisexual since I was a teenager and I'm very vocal about it. I talk about it on my social media. Like I do bisexual porn, like all that stuff. Right? And the amount of times I've had men DM me being like, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for being so open and out about it. And I'm like, well, we need to be able to provide a space for us. Right. And so like, even thinking back when I was younger, when I wasn't allowing myself to explore those aspects of my sexuality, I was fully cheating on my girlfriend at the time with men because it was like, this is an aspect of me that I need to explore, not to excuse my actions, but it's just very much like, but that is ultimately what led to.
We can feel that suck, right?
Yeah. And it's also like what leads to, people going behind their partner's back to, to hire professional sex workers is to be like, oh, so many of my clients, of my male clients are closeted bisexual men, whether they're in relationship with women or whether they're just not comfortable with themselves yet. There are aspects of your sexuality that you just cannot live without, and you can't continue living repressed. And in some way it will come out one way or another.
Yeah. And if we deceive or mute ourselves, we're going to deceive or mute our partner as well.
Yeah.
That's part of why I like how they come in and out of advertising Romy's industry, because you get the ad, you get the front facing part of the business. And then you see what happens operationally in the background.
Yeah, the nice lighting, the prepared speeches, the perfect company. So we're introduced to, Samuel is Harris Dickinson's character. We get introduced to him in the dog scene. And then we have this sort of meet the interns scene where he speaks up and he's not really supposed to speak up. And then there's the get me a cup of coffee scene where they talk about the dog. And she says, do you always have cookies on you? And he says something to the effect of like, why do you want one? And we're sort of off to the races at that point. This chemistry, she's intrigued. And the next scene is she goes home and tells her husband that she wants to watch porn with him, which he doesn't know what to do with, right? Something has happened with the Harris Dickinson Samuel character that's kind of starting to open her up a little bit, and she actually expresses this desire. It's funny that it's Antonio Banderas, right? Like international sex symbol.
Absolutely.
Super handsome.
Yeah.
Well, the director, Halina Reijn, said she wanted the husband to have no obvious reason why the woman would be absolutely devoted, because he's completely in love. He's sexy as all anything. Yeah. And even when she attacks him, he seems to have some capacity to hold the tension of marital strife, as it were, and be responsive. So she wanted to eliminate anything so that the focus was really on the existential crisis of Romy.
Which is great. It's great. That's an example of great casting, where his whatever vibe energy into the film, and that helps support the storytelling.
Yeah. And I also think that's a good commentary on how you could be in the perfect relationship. And if there's still something that's dissatisfying you, doesn't matter whether or not you're in a perfect relationship, you will actively try and seek that out no matter what. And it is not at all any fault of your partner. Because like Jacob, you're right, is a good husband. And so it's nothing that she is experiencing is his fault.
Antonio Banderas, what's your relationship to him as an actor?
He's so lovely.
I mean,
you're sighing?
Aside from just like kind of acknowledging that he was probably one of the first men that I've ever, like when I was younger, like really kind of like realizing my own sexuality. Like, he's very handsome, but also just loving everything that he was in.
He's wonderful. What about you?
The first time I encountered him was in Philadelphia, the Jonathan Demme movie, which is a really important film for me because I was a very evangelical Christian kid, purity culture. And that was the first movie that
it's a real relationship. It's not as hypersexualized between him.
It's not hypersexualized, for better or for worse. I think there's some critique around that. But growing up in a world that was very homophobic, that was the first time where the movie had a gay relationship there at the center, but that wasn't the whole story. And it was just like you saw this loving relationship between two men. And as a young man, I was being introduced to AIDS and like that whole story that gets hidden from you when you're in purity culture. And so Philadelphia is just one of those important movies that started to move things for me and help me realize this wasn't the whole story. So I have very sort of lovely memories of that film and that he's a part of that film. But yeah, and then he was just in lots of cool stuff over the years.
For some reason, my brain is telling me that the first time I ever saw Antonio Banderas was in Spy Kids, but I don't, which is very different. It's a very different movie.
Yeah. Well, Mask of Zorro came up for me too. So don't worry, it wasn't as
I think that was it.
Yeah,
I think it was Mask of Zorro.
Wonderful.
Oh, you want to talk about a bisexual awakening?
The unmasking of Zorro.
Okay, so we're introduced to Samuel. She goes back and talks to her husband. He's not quite understanding what she's asking. And then we get back to Samuel connection with Romy. So there's a holiday party. They have this interaction on the balcony where he says she's going to be his mentor, which she didn't know she was doing that. And then she comes back to the office later and finds his tie and takes it quietly into her office and inhales it, which is, we're seeing some deepening of something is going on with her. And then they have their first mentorship meeting. So they see each other on the elevator, then they're in their meeting and they have this interesting encounter. And he says, I think you like to be told what to do. And there's an interaction at the end where they kiss. What's your reaction to this growing relationship between the two of them at this point?
I think my issue with these kinds of films that try and build these kinds of dynamics is it's very hard for me to believe them, because I can't for 1 second believe that a CEO would be spoken to this way by an intern and not immediately fire him. Because I'm just so it's one of those things where I have to try and just live in that realm of disbelief, because otherwise I'm there's no fucking way this would ever actually happen in real life. And maybe it's also because I have friends in BDSM relationships. I'm in a BDSM relationship. And so I see depictions like this. And part of me is kind of oh, I mean, yeah, I guess this is kind of how that would work. But but then when you introduce power dynamics into this kind of thing, then for me, it becomes a lot harder for me to truly kind of really get on board.
Because of her power over him at that point?
Well, partly that, but also because just within a BDSM relationship, you kind of see it later on in the film when he tries to order her around and all this other stuff. And it's this assumption that people who claim to be doms in these relationships immediately assume that, oh, so you're the sub, so you have to do what I tell you. And if you don't do what I tell you, you're doing it wrong, right? It becomes this very kind of toxic dynamic because there's no understanding that where the true power lies within that dynamic is within the submissive, because the submissive holds the power of being able to be like, no, 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 you can't just mediate. I allow you as the dominant to tell me what to do because I still have my own personal autonomy, right? I let you tell me what to do. And so in this situation, I don't necessarily disbelieve the fact that Samuel could be a dominant. What I don't fully land on with this is the fact that I guess Romy in a professional setting is allowing him to talk to her this way in a professional setting.
That's so interesting. I'm kind of on the other side. Yeah.
Whereas if this were on a personal setting, I think this would be entirely different. I think if this were a situation where they happen to meet at a coffee shop, if their meet cute happened, actually, even if their meet cute happened in the same way, if it happened with the dog, and then she ends up going to like a coffee shop or whatever, or she goes out to lunch or whatever, it turns out, oh my God, my waiter is the guy who saved me from the dog. Then if their whole interaction happened that way outside of work, I would be more on board.
Interesting. I actually think it's part of the exhilaration is that context and the fact that he's so bold that he penetrates through the social conventions and that allows her to melt a little bit. But I don't also, in actually analyzing the film, which is why I don't think it's a standard BDSM film necessarily, is that we don't see her being dominant. She's pretty relational as a boss. She's like considering people's raises. She values people, but she does say everyone's just waiting for me to fail. That's not verbatim. So the high stakes of being a woman in a man's game and to have created the empire that she did as the head of her family in some ways as well, because her husband is creating. I don't mean that makes her the head of her own family, but she's always in a position of leadership, and to have that someone not relate to her on that basis whatsoever seems really powerful.
Let's just back up a moment, because we then have the sequence where he orders her the milk, and then they have their first sort of hotel meetup. And this is where it feels a little different from other depictions of this, like 50 Shades of Grey, where it's quite messy. And I don't know that he's done this before, or at least he's not sure how to do this perhaps. But there's the milk where he orders her to drink the milk. He leaves a note to meet at this hotel. And then they're just kind of like negotiating in real time, but not really sure how to do it. And this is where my response after I saw it was, like, he drove me crazy. He was so leaky. He was so like not able to hold or contain anything. And then it led into what I thought was coercion, which we'll talk about later. But how did that hotel scene land for you guys?
Oh my God. I feel so the opposite to you. But like, it was so interesting because when you left the theater, you were like, I don't know how I feel about that film. And my girlfriend loved it. So for me, I had a finally moment. Like, she walks in, she's spouting a whole bunch of inauthenticities and trying to get back into the role structure. And he's going, wait a minute, that is not what I'm reading on the instinctual level. Calls her out. And he's also mindful of consent. I didn't find him leaky at all. I found him like in his own truth and being like, are you going to join me or not? Are we doing this or not? Because this is what I'm seeing in you, and you want to rock and roll. Now, the sub-dom stuff, I could take or leave in terms of my own sexual essence. It's like, that's not the hot part for me. But I would say like a person like him that isn't intimidated by the facades, and I don't mean to throw away all social convention, because I think there's a reason that they're positive and that they're good. But a man that doesn't follow that conversation and prioritizes the deeper conversation is super hot to me. Mm-hmm. So when my partner and I left the theater, he was like, Ash, I don't really have that. And we had this beautiful conversation, because that's one of my number one things that I'm like, if you're intrepid and you're following your own voice and you're in a social situation, you're not afraid to override for your sense of truth. And I'm not talking in a petulant, young way. I'm talking in like a way that he does have containment. He's not spilling it all over the office. When they have a private moment, he tests the edge and watches her reaction and then continues to step in that way. So just in the layers of this movie, I did go back to my Jacob, and we did have the important conversation, because he's a lot more warm and subtle and generous in kind of social interactions. And he might, unless something was like against his values, He's radical underneath, but he's less bold of a guy in that way. So we talked about that. So that's what fires me up about Samuel. I think he's wonderful. There's a lot to say about that scene. We should probably break it down though. All the different moves that they make.
Well, tell me more. Like, what else stands out that you want to bring to the surface from that scene?
Well, the moment where he laughs and he's like, I can't tell, do you want this or not? Was like, it embossed itself in my mind. Like, I think of that moment in the movie because it's sexy, it's relational, it's daring. It's setting up what Lobo was talking about. Like, are we doing this or not? The contracting piece. Yeah. Because then the theater does need to begin. And my feeling of the energy containers that we make whenever we love make, which most people don't pay attention to, which is why sex coaching is so wonderful. There is a game time feeling when we start to make love. I often tell people, like, if you want to work out what you like and you want to do a lot of the cross communicating and you want to find your voice, do it in a separate session. When you go to make love, like, have sexercise sessions like you would go to the gym. You're not running the race. That's when you want the flow and you want to grid a space so it's super hot for you. And you might be like, this is what tonight is. If you're going through a really vulnerable time in your life, maybe you don't want to, maybe you do. Maybe that increases your desire to be topped or something, but maybe you want something really warm and nourishing. One of the things I'll say about that scene is at the end when he's actually masturbating her and you see how her sounds and her movements and who she is so different than when she's with Jacob. And it's so beautiful to see her rail. And then when her resistance finally melts and he gets her into that collapsed position where she's not worried anymore, where she's not carrying it all anymore, then he holds her and nourishes her. So, again, we're talking about containers. Like, people do come to my partner and I, for instance, for that type of work where they can be held. It's not two-way, but that there can be eroticism and then nurturing. Now, this is just like they're kind of they're figuring themselves out together.
So this is, I think, what we might call the midpoint of the movie, where we've been leading to this. It finally happens. They're slowly figuring it out. And then immediately after this scene, we have Never Tear Us Apart is playing. And it's this sort of montage of them having spontaneous erotic moments, essentially. And it's like 4 minutes. And then the threat comes, right? Like, that's in scripts lingo. It's like, that's the fun and games where it's like, they're finally doing it and they feel free and spontaneous. And then we kind of get this fatal attraction moment where he's in their home. And then she confesses to her husband, I've never had an orgasm with you, and sort of pushes him away. And where I wanted to jump to, because we're talking about consent, is the next mentorship meeting where he's threatening her. Do you want to lose everything?
Yeah, because I kind of lose it there.
This is where I get really angry at him, actually.
And again, this is what I mean. Don't fuck your staff. It's just don't, because then you can avoid all of that if you just don't fuck your staff. So it's like...
To me, this is where he reveals his true character, which he's trying to figure out what the power exchange is, but he's doing it by holding a gun to her head. Like, he's like, well, like, consent, both parties have to agree to it. That's what consent is. And if I don't do it, and he goes, then I'm going to go talk to somebody. That's coercion.
You're right. It doesn't become consent at that point, because consent is where both parties are equal in the conversation and you set up what your limits are on an equal level. When he threatens her, it removes that basis of consent, because if she consents to stopping the situation, then even if she consented, he still has that over her. He can then turn around and be like, I'm going to go and do this anyway. And it's like, oh, so you've then just completely ignored my limits. You've crossed a boundary here. You've ignored the consent that we've placed here. So really, she's in a no-win situation.
Yeah.
Right? I totally disagree with you guys. I think this is so awesome. When it comes to her house, it is that fatal attraction moment. And it turns out, this is why I love the movie. It's not fatal attraction. He's not there trying to put a rabbit. He's not trying to piss all over her. He's playing with their edges. And he actually had a reason to do it. So there's always this nebulousness about really what his game is. And I think that keeps us on our toes. And I think it keeps her in her sexual system in a heightened state.
But she was a no to that.
She was a no to what?
To him visiting her home.
But
in the car afterwards, she's like, don't ever do that.
Yeah. And so because they got too close, so she set a boundary.
Yeah. So I think in that specific situation, he's not necessarily doing anything wrong, because that limit was never placed. And yeah, you're right. He comes in with like, here's your laptop. And so it's like, okay, like, I get it. And I can understand her reaction to be like, because you're right, this is coming too close to home. Like, I want to keep these two things separate. So I understand that putting that limit after the fact makes a lot of sense. And so I understand her reaction, but I also don't think he's necessarily doing anything wrong in that.
I agree. And I think when she puts it up, he's always calling her out. She's never within her truth. She was doing that to her family the whole time. So I think he's just calling it, like, making them vulnerable. She was making her family situation completely vulnerable. And when it got real, she balked. So he's always saying, who are you and what are you actually up to? How she chooses to react and to try to regain that control is to say, now, I'm worried about you. Like, she's a tactician too. She'll get aggressive with him and then she'll try to mom him and then she'll try to boss him. And she goes into all these roles. And the only time he ever, quote unquote, submits to her and gets on the level is when she's real with herself and with him. And so when she starts massaging him and saying, I'm just trying to take care of you, he gets angry for the first time. Now, one of my big questions about this film is, how much do we really know Samuel?
No, we have no backstory.
We don't know who he is. So is he just another like pretty boy that women are now doing the same thing that men have done all the time with these gimmicks of like, this is who I want you to be for me, right?
Pixie dream girl.
Yeah, exactly. Is he just the dream guy? We finally get an insight into his world. There is a bottom for Samuel, and he is real in how he shows up. And he's saying, that's fucking insulting. We're in something that works for both of us. So don't jump up there and say you're taking care of me. So my question of that scene is, what would have taken care of him? Because he says 3 times, you're not taking care of me. And he gets more and more escalated. And she won't let him out of the car, again, a consent thing, until she recontracts in a way that's safe for her, not the actual contract underneath. So I think it's actually genius. And I think he's well within his rights and that they've actually signed up to something deeper. This is what happens. I do couples counseling as well. This is when we see what people, the written contract people, have actually signed up for, the vows that they feel that they've taken, and the shadow curriculum under their relationship. And it's these insidious micro agreements that we sign up for underneath our marriages and our intimacies, saying, you promise not to push that button. Or you promise to be this way for me. Things up in their actual relationship is because of this gap. And I really think he makes it real. And I really think he has grievances that are real and that he's been in integrity the entire time.
I do think the gender you are matters when watching this film, because it's interesting that you're coming away with very specific things and we're coming away with very specific things. And it just happens to be that we are men coming out of this and you're a woman coming out of this and you're seeing it in a very specific way, which I think is also very interesting. Because also my girlfriend really liked it too.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so I feel that moment when he's like, do you want to lose everything? Is him asking, like, how deep is your kink? Like, do you want to lose this? Because there's something embedded in her that wants she says it to her husband, Jacob, later. It has to be a risk where I could lose so much. And I think in that moment, he's not threatening her. And I don't think it is an ultimatum. I don't think he's trying to stay in the relationship. I think he's actually going, how much are we going to do this?
So you think he's actually playing into her kink?
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. I think he's giving her the control. And saying, how deep is your self-hatred? Because I was willing to get you to eat out of my hand, but like, I don't know what I'm willing to do if you're that dark.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's how I feel it.
Okay.
And again, of course, he's like, you got 7 minutes, which is the perfect retaliation for the previous scene where she didn't want to be there, but showed up anyway.
So let's jump. So then they have another sort of climactic hotel meetup where he truly bosses her around. It's a little more direct and a lot of the stuff happened. How did you take that moment where he was telling her she's beautiful and she wouldn't believe that?
I think that's just I think it's just the classic thing of just women who, for lack of a better phrase, women of a certain age, big air quotes, just kind of like struggle with that whole thing in general. I think that's just a commentary on just women. I think you said she's 49 in this film.
In reality, she's like
older.
56.
Oh, yeah.
She's playing someone 49. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like the character of Romy is like 49. And I think women in general, as they age, they just kind of feel less and less attractive
and less worthy because of that.
Yeah,
that's that whole socialization.
Yeah, so I think, and I think that's just very much just a commentary on just straight up just society and Hollywood in general, because like that was the whole point of The Substance, right? Was just like once a woman hits a certain age, she's no longer marketable, which is wild because Nicole Kidman is gorgeous. I think that moment is just very much a commentary on society making women feel less attractive as they get older.
Well, I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition because he's quite honest with her in the car. And again, I don't think this is a mean thing to say. He goes, "You look like a mother to me. I don't want a relationship. So if that's what you're worried about,"
Right.
which could seem like a really crap thing to say. But I think he's honest, just being honest. I think he finds her beautiful. I think she looks of a different generation, and there's a generational clash between permissiveness. He's obviously a lot more liberated and free. I thought the father figure song, like we have
I was going to say,
genius, and the little dance. Oh my God. And that was so wonderful to see how with himself he can be. She doesn't have that. She abandons herself at every turn. He's the foil to everything she's ever lived, and the denial and the suppression of like, this must be bad. He embraces it all. He embraces her. He embraces himself. And that winding shot of him dancing towards her with father figure, I was laughing. I felt so much liberation in this film as a woman watching it. And also, back to my, I don't think it's really a sub-dom only dynamic. I saw two people exploring what they like. Sounds like a very pleasant evening, a Sunday afternoon, like, why not? Church, like do it for 4 hours, find out who you are. I thought it was really interesting that the safe word was her husband's name. Now, that's not a parachute pull. I don't know what it is, What was your read on that scene? Jason, I want to know how you feel.
Yeah, my note was, in my experience of that scene in the hotel was colored by the fact that I had interpreted their relationship as at least partially coerced. So I understood that she wants to experience this. She wants to experience submissiveness. And I interpreted him as coercing her into this situation. So agreeing with you, I feel like the power should be in the hands of the sub. And I felt it was in his hands. So when she's sitting in the hotel, it's like the initial scene, she's sitting in the couch, and I can't remember the exact questions, but essentially like, do you want this or not want it? She says, yes, she wants it. But also, I don't know that she had as much choice there as I would have liked her to have. So there's some really interesting moments that unravel and come to the surface. And it was colored by my own interpretation of like what brought them to that moment.
Something that the writer-director said that I really loved is that she never wanted people to know who had the power. And she wanted the film to just look at everything without judgment. And I think I like these little nooks and crannies, like in the hotel scene as well. He's like, you can't just pick me up and throw me away. Yeah. You can't pretend that you're not enrolling me in the way that you are. And so he's always trying to notice her agency that she's denying in much the same way she participated in her marriage. And I think the ultimate reclamation is at the end when she says, it was all me. So anyway, don't jump too far ahead.
From there, we move into what are the sort of final sequence of scenes. Maybe this might even be the third act, where we have a Christmas party where Samuel brings Esme, her assistant, and she's really upset by this. Like practically like headbutts him like a goat might, and says like, "You're mine, you're mine." That's what I was thinking of when I saw her do that. She actually then warns Esme about like, you shouldn't be hanging out with that Samuel guy. Then we have this nightclub scene, which to me felt like a Basic Instinct homage.
Back, yeah.
And then Esme visits her and blackmails her. And then she confesses to Antonio Banderas, to Jacob, which he's devastated. He's angry. And then we get the Jacob Samuel headbutting, fight, physicality. So we have all these scenes in a row, and then we get to the very end. But what was your reaction, experience of these moments where everything's now coming to a head?
I mean, it all makes sense, because obviously Esme is going to be pissed. Obviously Jacob's going to be pissed. And it's that whole thing of, I don't want to say it's cliche, but it's very like, yeah, this is the result of your actions. This is what happens when you go behind your partner and you cheat. Just quite frankly, because that's what she's doing. Like, it's not uncommon for people to go behind their partner's backs to get what it is that they need. I mean, like, hell, that's half of what the sex work industry is people seeking their needs to be met, right? And I am of the personal opinion that if you are seeking your needs outside of your relationship, but it is what is keeping you sane in that relationship and what is ultimately allowing you to then be a good partner to your partner, and everything works within your primary relationship, then I am of the personal opinion that I don't think cheating is necessarily the worst thing to happen, if it's done in a way that you're seeking things outside of your primary relationship, and then your primary relationship is thus then suffering because of that, whether it's because you're distancing yourself or whether, like in this situation, your work is being affected, then that's where things need to be like, okay, well, we have a problem. Or if your partner is just like, well, this is something I can't reconcile because you have betrayed me and, all this other thing. So there are factors that come into play that can absolutely make cheating bad. Again, coming back to the whole thing of like, if this wasn't happening in the workplace, if Romy was seeking these kinds of things with Samuel outside of everything, there was no chance that Samuel and Jacob could meet. There was no chance that anything could bleed into each other. I would almost be like, look, if she needs to be in a kinky relationship, then let her be in a kinky relationship like once in a while. If this is just happening like once a month or even once every couple months, and then she comes back to Jacob and she's like, all right, we're good to go. I got what I needed out. And we can go back to family dinners. We can go back to having sex. And, you may be receiving pleasure. I may be receiving pleasure in a different way. Cause I think like kind of jumping to the end a little bit where they're back to having sex with each other, but she's like thinking about Samuel, right? Like whatever's going to get you off, girl, like do it.
Yeah, there's so many different paradigms of like what our allegiance should be when we're in a relationship. And I know it depends culture to culture. Like some people are like, well, if cheating helps stabilize that, or like the thing is, why would you want to break up a family? And that's where it is. Whereas in North America, it's more like cheating so bad. And there's many ways of looking at it. I think for me, what my due north has always been as a person is maximizing people's choice to live the life that they want to live, whether that's me or others. So if they have a bunch of information, then I don't feel like they're empowered to like live the life that they want to live. And I always look at creativity versus coping. Like, is there an addiction or is there like a something that's stabilizing our inauthenticity, or are we actually becoming more ourselves? And I see that this thing that she's been trying to cope with her entire life has become unwieldy, and she's found another way to cope with it, which is like almost a step forward, maybe a step back for her family, I'm not sure, but a step forward in her understanding of herself. However, it's not integrated into her life. So she can't really create with it. And I think become it. She's still thinking, oh, at least I've got someone to play with this part of me that I haven't loved before. So it's always a rocky transition when there's a rude announcement to our partners. And I thought his reaction, I was surprised. I thought they were going to play it where he didn't get as angry as he did and throw her out. But I actually thought that showed how passionate he was about her. And he wasn't willing. I think in some ways he was calling out her bullshit like Samuel does throughout the movie, and saying, look, you're at war with this part of yourself, but you never brought it to us. You never brought it to the altar of us and gave me a shot at this. And you're just thinking you're bad. Well, I'm not going to sit here and feel sorry for you while you've created all of this.
Yeah, because I think ultimately to say Romy's the bad guy, I don't think is entirely accurate, but to also say that she's completely out of fault is also incorrect, because this whole situation is her own doing. And I think when she came to Jacob and was like, hey, I'm unhappy with the sex that we are having, I think her doing that was the right path for her to take. It's funny because like in my brain, I'm like, this movie could have been solved just with just straight up communication. If she had just like come forward, here's how I'm going to solve Romy's marriage. Here's how I'm going to fix Romy's marriage. If she had come forward to Jacob and been like, honey, we've been married for a long time. I am very unhappy sexually. Here's what happened. I met a guy. He served me this way. I felt really good. Yes, I cheated. I'm very sorry. I acknowledge what I did was wrong. Be mad. Jacob has every right to be mad. Here's what I would like to do to bring what I experienced into our relationship to maybe make things a little bit more balanced. Now, Jacob can take that and either be like, I can't do that, so what can we do to fix that? Or he could have been like, nah, man, you cheated on me. Like, we're done. We're filing for divorce. Now, I think that would have been a bit extreme, personally. I think that would have been the extreme choice, just to immediately jump to a divorce. But that is what society says should happen, right? But that's because so much of society doesn't allow for nuances of sex and sexuality, right? It doesn't, and let alone allowing a woman to explore her own sexuality and to be like, yeah, I like kinky sex. You can't give me kinky sex. It's like with me and my husband, like we've been together for over 10 years. I was very upfront with him from the very beginning that I'm bisexual and I need to be with women. And so for a while, we were very like, okay, so we were monogamous for a while. And then slowly we started to open things up. I started to explore with more women and everything. We had discussed me being able to go and sleep with women. And then that kind of expanded from there. But so much of that was like step by step by step by step. So I think the situation here at the end with everybody coming to head makes complete sense. And I also think that everyone is kind of in their rights to be angry. Like Jacob, absolutely, because like all this is going on without him. He's like, so for him to suddenly find out, hold on, my wife has been cheating on me this whole time, multiple times, without coming to me and telling me what it is that she needs. Absolutely, he has every right to be mad, right? But I think then it kind of like comes back to what the director wanted, which is to have Jacob be a good example of a good husband and have it be that Romy's cheating is not because of his fault, but because of her not being fully satisfied and not, I don't want to say Romy's fault because it's not a fault that she has desires that she can't get met.
I think there's a little nuance, that's some really nice nuance in this film where there's a sequence of scenes where she confesses to Jacob. And then there's the Jacob Samuel fight, where some of Jacob's beliefs come to the surface around Samuel's, where he's like, Jacob, essentially those are outdated ideas. And then we come back to this heartfelt moment of Romy coming back to Jacob. And in between those two conversations with Romy coming to Jacob, she expresses essentially there's this like dark side to me that I've wanted to go away. And I want to be the person that you think you're seeing, and they wouldn't go away. And there's this great line where she says in the theater to Jacob, I told you I was someone else and got angry because you didn't know who I really was. And that's this like theme we've seen in a few of the films of like masks, right? These masks we wear instead of knowing ourselves and being honest with what's actually going on and then presenting that to the people we love. We present something else, and then that causes those dark side, quote unquote, as she says, dark sides to eventually surface whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I think there's so much to say. I just want to give a shout out to, all the kinksters out there, all the people out there with these sexualities that they're evolving, or if there's some cornerstones in their sexual landscape that they really don't understand. It can be confounding. It can be destabilizing. It can be really, if you have a turn on that you are uncomfortable with, or if there's something that you're really yearning for, it's hard to know how to explore it, who will support you, what its meaning and import is in your central relationship. And, I think we see in subtle ways peppered throughout the film as well, who she is as a mom. She's adoring, she's devoted, but she's also kind of doing it. She's still a bit removed from herself while she's loving everyone else. And I think that's something women get into very easily, is there's a gap between, because they're never their own center. So they're trying to serve their kids or their men in their life and then try to really excel at work. And then they feel empty inside. And so that emptiness, I think, is evidenced in, for instance, the last time she went and visited her own partner at his work and his passion was when she thought he was having an affair. So why isn't she visiting her husband at the theater? Why is she pretending to go back to work when it's his opening night? We see that her energy needs something for itself. And I just think that our sexualities are so layered. We're so layered as people. There's 2 or 3 circles that interact about what's going on in our development, what's always been there all along, and how we're feeling at this stage in our life and who's around. And they all interact with each other, which means we're always evolving as sexual beings. And there's always things that, like, not everything can be in the foreground. There's always going to be something in our blind spot. And our sexuality, in my experience with clients in my own life and my friends and family, is it's always got something new to teach us, and it seems to have access to all of it. So that's coming from the dreaming reality in our eroticism, which is our unconscious, not what's conscious to us. And if we think there's something inherently wrong with that, it's a long journey. And I think that's very common for kinky people. I've had many clients who don't enjoy sexual activity as it's presented in this culture. They would like what's truly arousing and gets them wet and hard. It might be a series of other behaviors, like eating habits together, like maybe not even anything genital. So I think we have to give a lot of space for, I think, what arouses us could be worked with, evolved, questioned, recalibrated, but also what arouses us, primarily we have to start with its life-giving. and we have to lean into it to understand it better. And I think that's one of the main things that the film teaches. Now, Jacob also says to him, you know, you were used, right? She's abused you. So he sees the power as resting with his wife because he believes in her power and she has great power in their family and relationship. That is not Jacob's perception. And I also thought there was a really interesting moment where you're not sure whether he's having a panic attack or a heart attack. And she comes to help him and he says, no, not you. He can't stand being touched by his wife yet. And Samuel's the one that supports him and gives him that love. And then he also leaves. Another thing that makes me feel that he's actually got some really good, deeper boundaries. They're more nuanced, they're more subtle, but I think he's a really interesting character.
So there's two scenes in the film I want to just touch on before we wrap up. So the board member, Victor, I think his name is, comes into her office and mentions that Samuel's taken a job elsewhere, which to me feels a little too clean, but setting that aside, and he essentially tries to blackmail her as well. And I love this moment where she just kind of stands in her true authentic self and desire and says, like, if I want someone to, I can't remember what the line is, but I'll pay them to do it. Like she just owns it and basically says, fuck you, you have no power over me. And then there's the scene where she is having sex with Jacob. It seems a little kinkier than before, maybe, but we're getting these flashbacks to Samuel with the dog. You interpreted it as her needing that to kind of get off. How did you interpret that?
I interpreted it as him being the little sexual angel in their life that evoked this between them. So I had a slightly different interpretation. It's interesting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I guess to me, maybe it's because like just kind of coming back around to her connection with Samuel, I guess I felt was, well, there was a little bit of like an emotional connection. I think their connection was just much more physical. And so her coming back to Samuel while she's having sex with her husband is just kind of perhaps not necessarily a situation of, oh, I need to think about Sam to come. It's, oh, I'm thinking about Sam because I'm remembering how this felt with him because she hasn't made those connections with Jacob yet. She needs to kind of like rewire her brain almost to kind of associate Jacob with that kind of kinky rough sex that perhaps they're going to start exploring more in the future because now Jacob is in the know, as it were.
Yeah, I feel like there's medicinal relationships that come through our life, and there's people who don't talk to us and relate to us. They evoke something in us. And I think that's twice as powerful as any relationship that's built. And maybe that doesn't mean that they help give us a life and they share our reality. But those relationships that evoke our depth, I think, are profound. And when we find them in our life, they shift us strongly. And I think that's what puts us in the realm of sexuality. And I think that's what Samuel was for her. One other thing I just want to mention that we haven't been able to touch on is who she is as a mother to both very different children. Because she has one kid who's towing the party line and is very mainstream in some ways. Well, question mark, right? What's her sexuality going to need? But then the other one is super fringe. And at first they're at loggerheads. And the more her mom unravels, the more that daughter who was trying to antagonize and call her out on her beauty procedures and who she was being, and like, I know you, actually ends up being her foil, ends up being her rescuer.
Isabel,
who says, I'm worried about you, Mom. And then a bit later comes and gets her and brings her back into the family fold. And kind of, I feel, mirrors her willingness to own all parts of herself to her mom and say, don't worry, we're all faulty. We need you. We love you as you are, and becomes her angel.
Yeah. And I think that could only really happen with a character that is kind of inherently viewed as being on the fringe, because they understand that. They understand that feeling of being like, yeah, I'm so very othered, but I know what it feels like to live my authentic truth and still be accepted by my family, right? I kind of have that a little bit. I'm like one of the only ones that's like queer in my family. My sister's eldest has come out as like non-binary, gender fluid, but they're still very young. They're only like 20. So they're still very young and still very much exploring themselves. But I'm like the only one that's like, that has been out, I was the first one to come out of my family. And not to mention the fact that my family know what I do for work, which was an interesting conversation.
Right. Rare.
But like, so I very much kind of feel that feeling of like, I'm so very different from the rest of my family, but to kind of know that I still have a place in it is kind of nice, despite just like general like disagreements with things. And like, they don't like that I do what I do, which is kind of fair. But I'm still welcome at Christmas.
Yeah, that's very
And so,
different.
and so,
Any, yeah,
so is my
that's
husband, like, hopefully after more than a decade of being with him.
right.
But
Oh,
yeah,
that's
so
fortunate.
yeah, so like to being the quote unquote the black sheep allows you to see things a little more clearly, you know. So it makes sense that Rami's kid would be the one to bring it back, because she
Yeah.
sees what Rami is going through. She sees Rami kind of starting to kind of step outside of the traditional, and is like, oh, my mom's going through that. Okay, so she's going to need some support for this.
Right.
So instead of judgment, it's compassion. Yeah. So we come to the end of the film. I'm wondering if there's just anything else we want to touch on, any things that we've left that we want to bring up.
Could you do yours first? What are your final impressions of the film that strike you? Are you still in the same place as when you left the theater?
No, I definitely have more affection for the film, seeing it a second time, than I did in the theater. I mean, the opening scene was like, oh my God, this movie's going to do this. This is amazing. I love that a film is making space for these questions. I struggled with the Samuel character, and it was interesting to notice how much he irritated me. What is that telling me about myself? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
That I had to wrestle with. The one last question I think I wouldn't mind bringing to both of you is the really good films, like the films that are working for us, that feel powerful. They're very cohesive, and usually every scene is about the same theme. So I was curious what you thought. If you had to use one word that applied to every scene. It's not that like the scene might explore that one word positively or negatively or flip it upside down, but it is the subtext for every scene. What would that be for you?
Ooh, good question. That's juicy.
I think for me it would be repression. Yeah, because it ultimately comes down to just that feeling, like from the top of the film, it's Rami repressing well, she's not repressing her orgasm, but she's repressing
Her truth that she's not orgasm.
the legitimacy,
Yeah.
I guess,
Yeah.
air quotes, of her orgasm,
Yeah.
because she fakes an orgasm and then goes off and actually gives herself a real orgasm. So she's repressing the fact that this is what I actually need in order to come. And then she's repressing these feelings with Samuel of like in the beginning, she kind of represses like, oh, I'm feeling things for him, but I also can't, I'm not allowed, but I want it. And then repressing this idea of like, oh, I like being in the submissive role. And then, you know, repressing the truth from her husband, you know, so all these, so I think it is kind of repression, I think, is a pretty common theme throughout the film.
I think for me, it's what we present versus the full truth of ourselves. And it's kind of like a pitch for how we might be able to interact with all the different dimensions of our being. And I think it's, there's parts of us that are obscured from ourselves, and why, and how much are we participating in that, and what's our allegiance to the other people that we have relationships with that depend on us. And I think it's much broader than many people. I think it's an easily misunderstood movie because it exists in like the tiny connective tissue of the film. I don't think it's making broad, bold statements. I think it's a thought piece. And I think it steeps you in very beautifully. I mean, we didn't talk about the cinematography much, but I've got a new DOP crush, Jasper Wolf. I think he did a beautiful job shooting the film. And I do think it's talking about sexuality and how to participate with ourselves in any domain of life. What about you?
Yeah, I think that you're both saying essentially there's two sides of the coin, right? Repression, authenticity, or something like that, or repression or your own truth. I think that rings true. There's also something around, for me, power or empowerment, because there was sometimes these insert scenes where Esme is talking about female empowerment, but that's connected to that, right? Like repression is often, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like you don't feel like you have the power. You don't feel empowered to just be yourself.
Yeah, well, and I think that's probably, we didn't have a lot of time to talk about where these things like come from in ourselves, but I do think kink is a great way of exploring the natural power dynamics in politics or like an identity. And also, I remember there a reference to her growing up in a cult. And that's a whole bunch of different types of controls and things that would be very confusing. And so, yeah, I think playing with roles and liberating ourselves, sometimes in more structured situations than the ones that they were in, is a really great healing tool. What are we left with, guys?
I think my final thoughts in general is everybody should have a slut phase. Everybody should just have a slut phase where they just go out and they just do what they want and they explore what it is they want and they figure themselves out. I firmly believe that's what your 20s are for. People getting married in their 20s, I think, is just an inherently bad decision because you don't know, you don't know who you are when you're in your 20s, right? And so I think you should allow yourself that time to be able to explore yourself, figure yourself out, and then come at it and be like, okay, now I'm ready. Because then you don't have to worry about those kinds of things when you're committing into that long-term relationship.
That was a great exploration of this film. As you said to me in a text, like, I think Halina Reign's filmography, we could sort of like dedicate the podcast to almost.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what she does next. And I just want to thank you both for this conversation. Lobo, thank you for joining us. It was rich. Really appreciated your point of view. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Please remember to rate, review, and follow. And please share the podcast to anyone you think would enjoy it. Remember to click the link in the show notes to take my Hidden Relationship Patterns quiz to start improving your relationships today. And reach out if you need support. Thanks for listening. See you next time.